You don't want to move very fast. You want to keep something between you and your target, so you're not out in the open. The mountains of Montana have always kept secrets, wild, untamed, and quiet. But today, the silence around one man's cabin has shocked even the toughest mountain folks. Just 1 minute ago, police told everyone what they found inside Tom Oar's hidden log home, and the details are super creepy. For years, Tom, the star of mountain men, showed everything good about the American frontier. Hard work, taking care of yourself, and peace away from the modern world. But when nobody heard from him for weeks, worry quickly turned into fear. Neighbors who had always loved seeing the smoke coming from his chimney suddenly saw nothing but still air. The cold mountain wind blew through the valley, but no sign of life came from Tom's cabin. That's when rangers decided to check on him. What they found after pushing open that old wooden door would shock even the most experienced survivalist. When rangers got to Tom Oar's property, the snow was knee-deep and the wind howled through the Yak Valley like a warning. His truck sat buried under ice, and his dogs were nowhere to be seen. The front door hung slightly open, something no mountain man would ever allow. As the first ranger stepped inside, his breath stopped. The cabin was dark, silent, and freezing. The fireplace was stone cold. Dust hung in the air like smoke, and a strange metallic smell lingered. Every detail of Tom's life stayed untouched. A deer hide still stretched on the frame, his handmade knife shining on the table, an old mug sitting beside it with frozen coffee inside. It looked as if he'd just stepped outside and never came back. On the far wall, a calendar was frozen in time, its last date circled in red, October 3rd. Next to it, pinned under a knife, was a piece of leather with the words, "Keep the fire alive." None of the officers could explain the eerie stillness, or why a faint humming could be heard under the floorboards, like wind trapped underground. They searched every corner, but found no sign of fight and no footprints leading away. One ranger whispered, "It's like he just disappeared." Then, while checking under the main rug near the wood stove, they noticed the faint outline of a wooden door. When they pulled it open, a rush of stale, cold air escaped. A narrow staircase went down into darkness. Flashlights showed old planks and boxes sealed with wax and wrapped in animal hide. Each was labeled with faded markings and dates going back decades. One officer radioed for help, but before he could finish, his flashlight went out. In that instant, everyone heard it. 3 slow knocks. When the light came back on, the hatch seemed to pulse with frost. They closed it right away and backed away, shaken. The rangers locked up the property that night, leaving with more questions than answers. The next morning, a small team came back under strict orders to write down everything under that hatch. With cameras recording, they lifted the hatch again. What they found made every hair on their neck stand up. Dozens of leather-bound journals were stacked neatly in wooden boxes. The earliest dated back to 1972. Each journal was marked with a hand-carved symbol, a circle split by a single line down the middle. When they opened the first book, the pages were covered in Tom's handwriting. At first, it was what they expected, stories of trapping seasons and weather notes. But as they turned the pages, the tone changed. One entry read, "The light came again last night. The dogs hid under the bed." Another mentioned voices carried by the wind. Some entries were smudged and blurred. One journal even had a bullet hole clean through its center. They noticed sketches, drawings of figures with shiny eyes and stretched out limbs. Tucked inside the last journal was a folded piece of paper sealed with red wax. Written across it in shaky letters were the words, "If you're reading this, it's already too late." At that moment, the generator powering their lights began to sputter. Every light went out at once. In that pitch-black silence, one ranger swore he heard the same 3 knocks again. Slow, careful, and closer than before. When the team came back with backup, they brought in crime scene experts and scientists. The first few notebooks seemed harmless, but the further they went, the more messy the writing became. One journal described glowing lights that hovered silently over the tree line for hours. Another detailed a low hum that made the ground shake. But the most disturbing entry was dated just 2 nights before Tom's last known sighting. It read, The shapes didn't move like men. The light isn't from fire. It breathes. Next to it was a drawing of 3 tall figures standing behind his cabin. In the final journal, they found a small photograph. A blurry image of the forest at night with a faint glowing ball hovering above the trees, taken 3 weeks before his disappearance. Within days, unmarked vehicles arrived to transport everything out of the valley. The hatch under Tom's floor was filled with concrete. When asked why, officials claimed it was for safety reasons. But locals believed Tom had stumbled upon something ancient buried deep in the mountains. Not long after, strange reports started coming in from locals living near Tom's property. The woods no longer felt the same. Wildlife had disappeared almost overnight. One neighbor named Bill said he began hearing a low howling sound every night around midnight, unlike any animal he'd ever heard. Another hunter said his flashlight turned off and his compass spun wildly the closer he got. He saw faint pale blue lights floating above the ground. Word spread that Tom's land was cursed. Park rangers began getting calls from hikers reporting deep screams echoing across the valley at night. Search drones sent to map the forest crashed one after another near Tom's cabin. Within days, the valley was flooded with black SUVs and unmarked trucks. Federal agents blocked off the area. Men in hazmat suits entered the cabin while others set up radio towers. Residents were told to stay away. The sheriff's office got orders to stop their investigation. All evidence was handed over to federal custody. Some said the government had found something radioactive. Others believed it was biological. For 2 full weeks, the valley was under quiet lockdown. When the agents left, they sealed the cabin with steel locks. No trace of Tom or was ever found. Those who knew Tom best refused to accept the official story. Eustace Conway said, Tom understood nature better than most scientists. If something scared him enough to keep records, then it was real. Marty said Tom had grown quiet toward the end, often staring off as if listening to something no one else could hear. Even Nancy, Tom's wife, had gone completely off-grid. Fans flooded forums with theories. Some believed Tom had found a piece of an ancient meteorite. Others claimed he'd stumbled onto a hidden military experiment. Months later, a private search team quietly entered the valley. Within minutes, one of the dogs began barking loudly. They discovered a faint trail leading into the woods. They followed it for nearly 3 miles until they reached a frozen river. Just a few feet from the riverbank stood a massive pine tree with a carving that sent chills down every spine. The Wild remembers. Under it hung a small leather pouch. Inside were strange items, including a tiny shard of metal that vibrated and gave off blue light. Minutes later, their phones all lost signal. Then came a sound, low, deep, and booming, like a heartbeat from the earth itself. The dogs refused to move. One man swore he saw a tall figure watching them. When they blinked, it was gone. The team ran from the valley. Later that night, the man who took the shard called in panic. The object was humming and glowing. The call cut off. When they checked on him the next day, he was gone. His cabin door was wide open, coffee still steaming, just like Tom's. Since that day, no one else has dared to go back. But locals claim that on quiet winter nights, you can still hear the slow, steady heartbeat of the wilderness. Even now, the mystery remains buried under silence and snow. Late at night, truckers claim to see a dim orange glow above the tree line. Some say they've spotted a lone figure, an old man with a weathered hat walking along the frozen riverbank. Could he still be out there? The Wild keeps its secrets, and it remembers those who try to uncover them.